Good evening. That's great. When the microphone goes, we're in for a good night. Okay, everybody's there. I'm Bill Law, and I'm the president at St. Petersburg College, and I had a lavalier mic on for an event last year at some point, and as I was getting ready to start, one of my staff people was in the front, and she waved me over, and I went over, and she said, "You're hot," which meant the microphone is on, okay? But for me, that made my whole evening, okay? That was as good as life gets at my age, okay, is to have a young staff person tell me that. Again, I'm Bill Law, president at St. Petersburg College, and my job is to welcome you to our Seminole campus tonight. Put a little perspective, St. Petersburg College is, of course, a pillar in our community over a long period of time. I've just completed 4 years as president here, 4 of however many we want. I could not be happier to be here and proud of all the work we're doing. One of the more recent additions to our role of service to our community is the creation of a public policy institute, a place where interested citizens like yourself can benefit from having a college in your community. You can come to events like this, events of importance in our lives, events of interest to all of us. Our goal is to try to take national or global events and see if we can't plug them into local impact. What does it mean for us in our lives? So you read the headline, BP oil spill, what does it mean for us in Pinellas County? You read the headline about intergenerational guns, and we had a wonderful session in the last year on what does it mean for us. And tonight we're going to do one that's, I think, probably doesn't make the headlines as bold as some of the others, probably impacts our individual lives more than anything else. And we have a delightful panel to help us, and a certainly well-informed panel and a wonderful speaker. I get a 2-minute commercial. First of all, let me say thank you to our institute and then our friends at the Tampa Bay Times. Bruce Feldman is here tonight, but they are wonderful sponsors to help us with our event tonight. St. Petersburg College, by the numbers, everyone likes numbers. 7 campuses, 6, 7, 8, however you want, but you know our centers and campuses throughout Epi and Tarpon, St. Pete, Clearwater, Seminole, Allstate, St. Pete Gibbs, throughout our community. Secondly, we have, are you ready, 33,000 students. 33,000. We have, St. Pete College has always been at the forefront of public policy leadership. So St. Pete was the first of the old community colleges. Many of you know us as St. Pete Junior College. We are the first to have offered bachelor's degrees. That is now up to almost 1,200 degrees awarded every year in areas that make a difference in our lives: teacher ed, nursing, IT, safety and security. All of them are focused on helping people get meaningful jobs, beneficial jobs in our community, and it has worked really, really well. We looked at the statistics today. The students in our baccalaureate programs, if we say they tend to be older, they're not older than me, but they tend to be mid-career adults who are trying to earn a credential that will put them on yet a better career track, move them up in their career. So I forget the exact number, 60 or 70% though are are at age 40 and above, so it's really not your neighbor's kid who is here for 2 years before they go on to one of America's great state universities, okay? Bruce, Bruce is just sharing some good news. His son is a recent graduate and made a different choice, and one that he's just as happy about, okay? So the Institute has been a great success. Thank you for your participation and your sponsorship. The leadership of that Institute is a person who is really steady, focused, organized, and helps us understand what are those key issues. And I'd like to introduce to you David Clement.
Thank you, Dr. Law, and welcome all of our guests and panel members. Thank you very much. It's truly a pleasure to be asked to introduce our moderator tonight. He is a man who is respected all over the state of Florida. I dare say there are many places you could go, and not many places you can go in Florida and not have him be known. You could say, Jack Levine? Oh, sure. I know him from way back in '83 when he did a program here for our Child Welfare Agency. Or here might be another comment. Jack Levine? Oh, yeah, I get his emailed inspirational messages on the major holidays all the time, and they're beautiful. I have known Jack personally for over 30 years, going back to his early days as president of Voices for Florida's Children, where he was a tireless advocate for preventive investment in children, as he puts it. Now he has expanded that vision with the Four Generations Institute to maximize resources and promote a better quality of life for all four generations. Jack holds a master's degree in child development and family studies from Purdue University and a bachelor's in English from Hunter College of New York. And he has been a teacher, urban youth counselor, and you can imagine this in his younger days, a waiter and dining room captain at resort hotels in New York and Miami Beach. He served on the charter board of Voices for America's Children, and he advises the Family Institute of the College of Human Sciences at Florida State University and the University of Florida College of Law. He is a graduate of Leadership Florida and the first recipient of its Distinguished Alumnus Award. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jack Levine.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Well, thank you so much to truly each and every one of you. Dr. Law, thank you for your great leadership and friendship, and David and David's wonderful staff, Jacqueline, Shantae, they are fabulous, fabulous partners in this, and I know they're still personing the outside door, but I would tell you that they've been an absolute pleasure to work with for their competence and clarity. And Bruce Fallman, thank you again, Tampa Bay Times. We depend on you every day, and especially today for our sponsorship of this event. We're going to introduce our panel members in a few moments, but before I do that, I want to tell you we did some research on you. By virtue of your registering for tonight's event, we kind of checked you out. And one of the facts that we discovered was you were all children once. As a matter of fact, we also discovered that you had influences as you were growing up that were multi-generational. Well, we did the research. Not only which would be traditional parenting age, but you had elder influences. So we're going to do a 3-minute exercise. It's voluntary, but everybody will do it. In which we're going to ask you to very politely pair up and answer these 3 questions. And we're going to actually ask you to do that. And we're going to involve our panel in a little while to do this too. The first question is, introduce yourself to someone you don't know, maybe the row behind you, your name, and where you grew up as a child geographically. Where you grew up as a child. If it's more than one place, you can mention more than one place. You got a couple seconds to do that. And then if you would share, not just yet, some of these guys are jumping the gun. You know some of these guys? Jumping the gun. And then if you would share, just for a moment, who that elder influence was, however you define that, in your neighborhood, where you worshiped, in your school, somebody who was an elder, and just name that person and what that influence was. And we trust you. You'll tell the truth, and you will participate in this 3-minute exercise. It's a little bit of kind of moving around before we start our full formal panel. So name where you grew up as a child, somebody you hardly know, introduce, and who was your elder influence. Start now. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm going to ask for your attention. I'm going to ask for you for your attention, please. Now, just so you know, there is nothing to prohibit your continuing this new relationship you just made on your own time. So feel free to exchange or whatever it takes to keep in touch, and we hope you will, because one of the realities is we are supposed to be connected. Isolation is not a good human condition. Not being connected can lead to problems. Newborns need to be connected, don't they, to responsible caregiving others. Our elders need to be connected, don't they, so that they feel not only fulfilled and provided a dignified connection with family, if possible, or community, but across the stages and ages, we're supposed to be connected. So you just did a little mini exercise of connectedness. We all grew up somewhere. As a matter of fact, if you are a native Floridian, please raise your hand. Okay, well, I just did some very quick math, and you are slightly atypical in demography, because in reality, 3 of 4 Floridians over age 30, and I think that is the demographic of everybody in this room, maybe missing 1 or 2 people. 3 of 4 Floridians over age 30 are from another state or another nation. I just did some quick math. About 1/3 of you are native Floridians, so there's more of a native crowd, unusual. Maybe that motivates you to come out to community forums more so you can learn more about the changing Florida demography. But that is, in and of itself, a characteristic of our great, diverse, and growing state, is we're from somewhere else. So I asked you to say, where are you from? I asked you also to announce who was that influence. And we all have them. But I'm not naive. I know not all of our influences were positive. But guess what? We can learn from our negative influences too. But tonight our emphasis is positive influences. Those beacons who were there for us, who we somehow realized they'd be good to follow, and they brought us to where we are today. We've got 6 guest panelists who I am very impressed with. A few I've known for many years. A small handful I've recently met, but that's Florida too. You keep good relationships over time and you make new ones. That's the vitality of our wonderful state. I'm going to introduce them briefly by title, and then I'm going to ask them all to share with you what you shared across the rows, which is where they grew up as a child and who their positive influence was of another generation before we begin our actual presentation. So, Marcy Biddleman, the Executive Director of the Juvenile Welfare Board of Pinellas County. Please join me in welcoming Marcy. Eileen Boyle, Executive Director of Allegheny Franciscan Ministries, which is a foundation based here in Pinellas that does work in 4 communities around Florida. Eileen Boyle. Renee Flowers, who's an elected member of the Pinellas County School Board. Renee. The Honorable Judge Raymond Gross, who sits in the Unified Family Court, the 6th Judicial Circuit, which includes Pinellas and also Pasco County to our north. Ray Gross. Jeff Johnson, who's the State Director of AARP Florida. And Shannon Reed, who works for Raymond James Financial in planning and also in strategic thinking about that great financial organization. Shannon Reed. Okay, and you already met our water guy, David Clement. Thank you very much for our refreshment, David. So, Marcy, where did you grow up? Where did you grow up as a child, and who was that elder influence?
I grew up in Titusville, Pennsylvania, and then at the age of 12 came to Florida, St. Petersburg. So most of my life's here, few short years. And my influence, I'm sure that you would like somebody outside the family, but I have to say my parents. And then I could name multiple teachers. I think there was good influence all the way. I don't know why I stood out. A little bit of it had to do with behavior, but basically, I'm sure that they just saw something that they could help me with. So
Now, Marcy, there's all kinds of behavior.
yeah, well,
There's good behavior, and also there is correctable behavior. Which did you imply?
I was correctable. I got here. I'm here. It's working.
So far, so good, as
So
we
far, so
say.
good, yes.
Good, thank you. Eileen, tell us about you.
So by the time I was 12, I grew up in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Virginia, California, Hawaii, and Virginia again. I was a Marine brat, oorah, and so a little bit of all over. I'm going to cheat on the answer to the influence because I want to talk about a woman that I knew that for the 2 years between college and graduate school, I was a live-in helper to a 98-year-old woman, Mrs. Helen Farrar Warren Smith, who married Mr. Smith and insisted she use her entire name because it was more important than Smith. But she was a remarkable, remarkable woman, and my first experience with a super senior. So she was a real influence.
And so she was 98, and you were college age.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
She graduated from my college in 1908. I graduated in 1983, and she came back that year looking for a helper.
Okay, Eileen, I think that's within the rules. Gold star. Renee.
My growing up was in Jordan Park, so I'm a native of St. Petersburg. I was the last set of babies that were born at Mercy Hospital, which was the all-African-American hospital. Most influential in my life, I would have to say, other than family, it would be Mr. Burney, who was the principal at Jordan Elementary School. Mr. Burney was a longtime educator, but had no hesitation in going to your home after school and making sure that your parents knew exactly what happened in school that day. Not often for me, but mostly for my brother, but...
Oh, so he's not here to defend himself.
No, he's not. And I'm doing what I did back then. I was a tattletale, so I'm telling you. The baby of 12, I got that privilege. But it will be Mr. Burney. And it is interesting how things go full circle because here I am now in education.
Thank you, Renee. Your Honor?
Well, I continue to break the pattern because as I raise my hand, I'm a native Floridian. I was born and raised in Orlando, and I'm proud to say my mother was born and raised in Orlando, and the person who proved to be really the most important to me growing up would have been my maternal grandmother, who married in Jacksonville in 1908. That comes up again. And they immediately moved from Jacksonville to Orlando with a brief stop in Sanford. And I was telling Renee they had planned on relocating in Sanford, but you probably have to be an old native Floridian to know this, but the only water they had was what's called sulfur water. And they said, this isn't going to do, and they just went down the road to Orlando. And so my family goes back over 100 years in Florida. I was a bit of a history buff, and I heard "Go West, young man," and I-4 took me to the Tampa Bay area. I didn't know I was supposed to keep going, but I did. I came to the Tampa Bay area and was an early student at USF and did my undergraduate work at USF, and then I'm not wearing this garnet and gold tie by accident. I did go to law school at FSU, but I'm actually wearing it today in sort of an honorarium for a friend of both Jack's and mine who passed away last week, and we were both at the funeral of Dr. Stanley Marshall, the former president of FSU. And so this is sort of a shout out to Dr. Marshall today. Again, growing up in Orlando, which was a very, very different place, you know, immediately after World War II when I was born, and before the first big change in the Orlando area was not Mickey Mouse, but was Sputnik. With the launching of the satellite, it changed this country and it changed Orlando forever when Martin Marietta relocated 12,000 jobs under one roof as part of the space industry. And Orlando changed. It did not remain the citrus seasonal visitation. My grandmother while not formally educated, was without a doubt the brightest and most amazing person. She was credited as being the first woman in America who had a regularly scheduled radio commentary show in 1932. It was unheard of. And she was a great leader in the business community and in the religious community and in the fabric. And she was the person that I looked up to, who helped inspire me to try and reach out for some of the goals that I hope to achieve.
Thank you. And from now on, it's Ray, okay? This Your Honor stuff, you're okay.
Ray. You can call me Ray, you can call me Jay, you can call me Ray J.
Jeff, your story.
So I grew up in the north, as many here. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. And I grew up in a very multi-generational household. I was in the fourth of 4 generations under one roof. I was adopted, and my sisters are baby boomers. I'm a Generation Xer. My parents are greatest generation, still doing well at 93 and 92. And my paternal grandmother lived under our roof for many years. And so I was kind of surrounded by the multiple generations. So since I followed directions and went outside the family when you said we couldn't count any of them, I thought about when I was a teenager having a youth director who was really not that much older than me, but enough that she was a good model for what it meant to be an adult, and particularly a young adult. And I think having older parents, it was very helpful to have that. So those generations go up and down, and I thought about including one of my nieces, who, of course, having a younger generation so close behind me was very formative, too.
And on the subject of following rules, would you share what your academic background is?
I am neutral on Florida universities. I went to Wake Forest University in North Carolina, majored in religion, and got a Master's of Divinity from Emory University in Atlanta.
Well, that academic background led you to follow all the rules this evening. I appreciate that very much.
Although I have to say, it's a Methodist seminary, and I converted to Catholicism while in the seminary, so I don't know that I followed all the rules.
Touche. Shannon.
Well, I am a native Floridian as well. I was born and raised in Tampa, although we moved when I was 15 to New York, and it took about 20 years to get back to Florida. So I moved my family back to Florida and then moved my extended family back to Florida because I have the grandchildren. So we now have multi-generations in Tampa. I have a hard time thinking outside of my family as well around my major influences. I mostly would say my mother, who's a particularly strong woman and an educator and a leader in her own right. But if I had to go beyond that, I might say my grandfather, her father, who raised her well and then was a big encouragement to me as a child, allowed me to be that bossy little girl who I think has turned out okay for me in the end. So I would say my grandfather.
Well, thank you. And I guess I'll play the game, too. My hometown is Long Beach, New York, a resort town outside of the city. And we had a teacher in 4th and 5th grade named Stanley Abramowitz, who loved language, the English language, and was a literature teacher and had his stint in the theater. And he and his wife Shirley used to take us guys and a couple of girls out to New York City in Broadway when I was a young child, and really arranged for us to meet folks. And I went to visit Shirley after Stanley had passed away and told her I became an English teacher because of her husband's influence, and we both had a great cry about that. And I will tell you, to this minute, Stanley Abramowitz travels with me. Every time I butcher the grammar, every time I overstep the language, he gives me a little poke. And I have a feeling all of our positive influences here and in the audience are with you today. Just contemplate that for just a moment as we go forward. Well, thank you for that indulgence, and thank you all for following rules. We are here tonight to share some realities about the demography and its implications on our families and on our community. Just to give you a quick glimpse of Florida, and there's some handouts that can prove this data-wise. Just don't dwell on them because we want your undivided attention. Florida is a multi-generational state. We are now a full 4 generations. When many of us grew up, we were 3, parents, children, and grandparents, and now we are children, parents, grandparents, and super elders. So we've added a generation in this past generation. And that's about longevity. That's about taking care of ourselves better. That's about all kinds of advances that have happened right before us in medical and prevention practices. In 1900, life expectancy in the United States was 47. In 1935, when the Social Security Act was passed, and they set the retirement age at 65, life expectancy was 62. We are now approaching, on the average, 80. But I'll give you a couple of quick facts. Of every 75-year-old who has ever been alive in the United States, 2/3 are alive today. We have more 85-year-olds today than 85-year-olds who have lived in our entire U.S. history. We are now at 55,000 centenarians, that's 100-year-olds, in the United States, and we will be 500,000 within this next generation. 10-fold increase. So the questions we have before us are not whether we are 4 generations, but what can we and should we be doing with those realities in front of us. So we've asked our panel members to give their perspective on our multi-generational community, because it's not just elders that we're concerned about, it's also our children and all of us in between. So each comes from his or her own perspective on this topic. We've asked them to present their thoughts about both the challenges and the opportunities. And our leadoff is my good friend, our good friend, Marcy Biddleman with the Juvenile Welfare Board of Pinellas County.
Thank you. I always like to start with the positive, so opportunities. As I think back about when I started in the child welfare field, there was diversity, but it wasn't necessarily in the family. There was parents and children and brothers and sisters, and grandparents were grandparents, and you had extended families, and oftentimes lived in the same community, either that you were born in or that your family, your extended family, lived in. And as time has gone on now, as I think about what we do at the Juvenile Welfare Board, there is every combination that you can think of as far as parents, as far as grandparents being parents, because we lost a generation or two, as we talked about, as we went through, for those of us in the age group that I'm in, the Vietnam War, the drugs and alcohol, the issues that just took out a lot of young parents. And AIDS, there were so many things during this time that the idea of family became pretty jumbled. People living together who took care of young people were a family. And look at how many times we've changed that definition and as we try and expand and be inclusive. In fact, that's been probably the best thing that has happened when we talk about diversity, when we talk about intergenerational. I think that intergenerational is just another name for what we've been doing for an awful long time about diversity. All people are in. You have to. Anybody who's heard me talk in the last year knows I talk about collective impact. And it means everybody is in the group. Everyone does something. Everyone has some value, and we need to figure that out. We need to figure out whether the value is, it can't be just because someone has a degree. It can't be just because someone lives in a certain part of a neighborhood or community. We have to figure out where everyone's worth and value is, and that brings about a lot of really good things. So the opportunities are, it's a good thing because we have expanded leaps and bounds who can help. Whether it be the words I always think about are, who are we going to engage now? Who do we extend to, and how do we improve what we're doing? Not necessarily by money, but certainly by people who have talent and skill that they don't even know about. So part of engagement is teaching and learning, and that's something that I think we do a lot of. When you talk about, I even forgot the word, we had opportunities and what? Challenges. Oh, challenges, yes. Challenges really are handling the things that I've talked about, and challenges are trying to make a difference between where money serves a purpose and where relationships serve a purpose. And sometimes we get farther on those relationships. For a while I was the executive director at the Free Clinic in St. Petersburg, and my little thing was, what do you do before you get the first dollar? Which made people think so much differently about how we did things, how we started projects, how we got involved in things. Because if you waited until money came, you might not ever do it. And so a part of the challenge of today is trying to figure out how to do things. The opportunity is we have an awful lot of people who can be involved in it, but maybe it's because it's budget time. I'm pretty bogged down by money right now. No, I think we have many opportunities to do things, but you know what? The challenge is doing it right, making sure that the right people, for all the right reasons, get the dollars that they need in a timely way. I mean, I think that's the whole point of it.
Marcy, I can't go on to Arlene without mentioning the voters of Pinellas County in 1945-46 created the most innovative vehicle for investing in quality programs for children called the Juvenile Welfare Board of Pinellas County, the first in the nation. The voters of Pinellas County went back to ballot in 1990, not only reauthorized it, but allowed another access to another half, up to another $500,000 for those investments. You are a leadership county. 7 other counties have followed your lead since then in Florida, but there is something special about this community, this county, and your leadership is known because it is not just about money, but the money doesn't hurt any. I'll tell you that right now. Eileen.
Thanks, Jack, and hi, everybody. One of the challenges, and I'll sort of start with challenges because I like to end on a high note, right? So the opposite. One of the things that I was thinking about today in preparing was about the demographics and how different demographics are in one neighborhood to another, in one community to another, in one county to another, versus all of Florida. So when we look at just thinking age, even the age demographics of the state, and we can think about how do we address that and how do we connect the communities and how do we connect the ages. Then we look at the demographics of a county or of a local community, and we can have, people age 65 and up only 6% in one community. We can have children 19 and under 46% in one county. So vastly different than overall. And so I think that's one of the challenges for us, is to pay attention to the communities that we're looking at and not make blanket decisions for the state based on bigger numbers. And I love data, so it's not that I don't think the data is a good thing, but to really pay attention to the people. So when I was thinking about kind of in general challenges and opportunities, I was thinking about it from a philanthropic perspective. I work for a foundation. We spend money for fun. That's what we get to do. It's a great job and a really hard job. And The trend really in philanthropy has been to really try to be more collaborative and more flexible in recent years. And so those are two areas that I think really apply to this issue as well. So we're members of the Florida Philanthropic Network. We work really closely and have for years with other funders, other foundations. It's a great association, statewide group. But what we really need to do is to work with other folks, all these people, to address issues in community. So we can't stay in our silo, and no one who's on this stage, no one in the seats there can stay in their silo and actually make a difference in community. So I think that was one of the things from philanthropy perspective, but that I think applies to everybody. The other piece is flexibility. For us, we have about $6 million a year that we award in grants to organizations, mostly in 6 counties in this state, including Pinellas and Hillsborough. This seems like a lot of money, but it's really a drop in the bucket to what is needed and to what is available through government and through other resources. So we have to think really creatively. It's about spending money well, but putting money in the right place at the right time. I'll give a quick example that's a free clinic example for Marcy. We have been seeding a Florida Free Clinic Association, so trying to help free clinics all around the state and charitable clinics to connect with one another so they can talk, they can help each other, they can learn from each other, they can maybe do some networking, have a conference every year. $20,000 a year for 3 or 4 years. And then this past year we gave them $50,000 to try to spark a little bit more. And they hired an executive director for the first time, part-time. And then they were in the right place at the right time to get a $4.5 million appropriation from the state. Happened to be a little extra money this year, happened to have some of the right connections, but they were in the right place at the right time. And we actually can take some credit for that, of our little $20,000 grants, because it was really seeding a vision that was important. So I think that there's opportunities to think about like that as well. So I have like 5 more things, but I'll wait. I'm sure there'll be another opportunity.
Eileen, I wanted to just follow up. Can you define for us the family diversity who come to free clinics, just so we're all aware of what that movement is about?
So free clinics are primarily designed for people who don't have other access to healthcare providers. They don't have health insurance, or they don't have health insurance that covers their healthcare needs. Even with the Affordable Care Act, and even if Florida were to do more to help people access healthcare, there will always be people in our communities who cannot afford the healthcare that is available through other means. So there are free clinics around the state. There's 125 free or charitable clinics. The charitable clinics are called that because they might charge a small sliding fee scale. Some of those 125 are mobile clinics, which go into communities where there isn't a freestanding clinic or a standing clinic, and some are networks of specialty care where people might get referred to doctors who are volunteering. And free clinics are primarily medically staffed by volunteer doctors. We have a great law in Florida that what's it called? The Good Samaritan law, thank you, that protects doctors. And then often staffed by paid nursing professionals and other medical professionals.
Thank you. Renee, you're up.
I guess I will start with talking about the opportunities for 4 generations being in a household. There was the generation of my grandmother, my parents, of course, the 12 children, and then my nieces and nephews, which were 27, which were grandchildren to my parents, great-grandchildren to my grandmother. And seeing other families having that same component in Jordan Park, which was a housing community then and still is now. The advantage to that is being able to learn about your history. That old adage that if you don't know where you came from, you have no idea where you're going. And so to be able to share some of those historical perspectives, and yes, the stories about walking 5 miles to go to school in the rain, in the snow, in the sleet, with 1 pair of shoes maybe for a year or so. And then looking at the abundance of what you have now and having a sincere appreciation for that. Specifically in the area of education. My grandmother only had a 3rd grade education. She was the 2nd oldest of 18 children. 4 of her siblings were born of her mother, Bertha Whitehead, and the slave master. The balance of them were from Bertha's husband, but not married husband at the time because, of course, slaves could not legally marry. And so the emphasis for all of my great aunts and uncles was education. Education is the doorway. It opens up so many opportunities, and we have shared that along the way. And so just to be able to sit down with some of the elderly individuals in Jordan Park and hear some of the things that they had to go through, but also some of the triumphs and some of the joy they found in simple pleasures, I think for me and for many others, just holds a really special place and encourages us to continue to do what we're doing now. What do I feel some of the challenges are? When you're looking at some households, the age of the grandmother can be in her 30s. Her daughter or sons are in their 20s. Their children are in their teens, and those teens have children. And so the concern then is if there's no one in the household that has a high school diploma, how do we break that cycle? How do we instill and encourage those families to know that you can still go on and do some of the things that you want to do, and it's never too late to go back and get an education if that is your desire. And if that is not your desire, how do you encourage the generations that come after you? How do you change some of that cyclical thinking that it doesn't matter? No matter what you do or how hard you work, it won't make a difference in your life, because it does. And not all families in the Pinellas County school system now have that issue, but I'm finding in communication and looking at some of our students with some additional challenges that may be social in nature, that is sometimes the crux of the problem. And so my wonderful, wonderful opportunity is, I know where I come from. I know my history. I appreciate it. I embrace it. I brought with me this evening the Weekly Challenger, where I had a chance to sit on a panel with Basha Jordan, who is the great-grandson of Elder Jordan, who gave the acres for Jordan Park to be built on in the first place. And it was because of the New Deal that the city of St. Petersburg got the money to even build the housing division for people who needed affordable housing. And where are we right now? Talking about providing affordable housing. So to be able to sit on that panel with that gentleman and hear stories about the family that gave my family an opportunity is just absolutely marvelous. And I think when we embrace that a lot more, we start to see those generations taking great pride in who they are, where they come from, so that they'll know where they're going.
Thank you, Renee. Excellent. Ray?
It's terrific to be able to follow some of these people and pick up on some of the things they've said and then add my own piece. And Pinellas really is special, but we only stay special if you allow us to be. Juvenile Welfare Board did start here, the first in the nation, but it'll be on the ballot in 2016, and the citizens are going to have to vote to keep it. And if we are not vigilant, and if we forget what it provides, we're going to take a very, very big step backwards. So that's my plug for the day. Follow it, help it, assist it. Pinellas led in some other ways. I serve in what's referred to as the Unified Family Court. And we were the first unified family court in the state of Florida. And we started with the idea that we should bring families together that have legal issues in front of one person who would have perhaps a little better understanding as to why this child was acting in this particular way. And if you understood the family dynamics, you didn't have one judge presiding over some aspect of the family life and another judge, and neither the twain would meet. So our goal was to bring them together, and we have, I think, done a good job of that. Among the issues that we face, and Renee just touched on it, and one of the most compelling issues, and I think this is more something of current generations, is the issues of children having children. And children having children, and again, you have the newborn, the 15-year-old mother, the mother or the grandmother of the newborn who's probably not yet 40, and a great-grandparent who is probably not yet 60. You know, we have 4 generations. And it is something that if we don't address as a community and try and do something different, because it's correct. We've got 4 generations, probably under 60, barely AARP eligible. And what we're finding is that as opposed to the traits and the things that we admire, the striving for education and one generation trying to better itself, that these chains are being broken. I take no particular pleasure when I'm in court and they say, well, we want to place this child with the grandparent. And I say, well, yeah, that's a better option than foster care or something like that, most of the time. I said, but you know what? That grandparent didn't do such a great job the last time around. When did they get so smart that they're now going to be able to parent this new generation? As members of the community, and in talking to Jack about this, one of the things that we talked about, that because this is sort of a proactive point, is how can we help? How can we be engaged? And I have the opportunity of working with some of the most selfless, dedicated people in the community, and those would be the people who are in the guardian ad litem's office. Okay? Yes, we look at multi-generations, but we have to be able to look outside the families and help break some of these cycles and bring in a measured voice of someone who can speak out for the best interest of that child, who can help that child achieve, who can speak out for that child. So for those of you who are looking for something to fill some of those spare time you have, let me encourage you, when you're not out getting votes for the Juvenile Welfare Board, talk to the guardian ad litem. Become the voice of that child and help that child. And you know what? By helping that child, you're also helping the parent and the grandparent, and you can break some of these cycles, and you can bring about some meaningful changes. So I think we're pretty lucky to be here in Pinellas County, but there's still a lot we can do, and we can do it with your help.
And by visiting guardianadlitem.org, there are instructions on how to contact our 6th Judicial Circuit Guardian Program and go from there. So very well done, Ray. Thank you.
Let me say, this audience is not so multi-generational as I look out, but not all guardian ad litems are 50 or above. You know, we get a lot of guardians from Stetson Law School. We get guardians who are social welfare majors from the colleges, or just people who, as opposed to big brothers or big sisters, they can come in. So encourage everybody. It is probably one of the most fulfilling things that you can ever do, and you become the eyes and the ears and sometimes the heart for the court, and help us see things in a more complete picture, and the function is just remarkable.
Thank you. Jeff?
You know, when Jack said, I want you to be on a panel, of course I said, sure, and then I called him a couple of weeks ago to say, what do you want me to talk about? And he said, about 5 minutes. And so that's pretty much my instruction, but this has been a wonderful panel. And what I would say is that the biggest challenge that we face, and we face many, is that when we think systemically, we tend to think either or. When we think locally and personally, we think both and. So, for instance, with a family, you don't think, well, we can either support our parents or our children, or we can, we can either afford to send somebody to school or provide health care. We find ways to make it happen. Or this may happen with some kids, but you don't think of your kid as either good or bad all the time. Any given day, perhaps a little bit of variation. And yet when we think about society as a large, we think, well, are all these kids good or bad for us? Are older people good or bad for us? And it's always the or. And can we fund, are we going to fund either children's services or elder services? And I just think that that's the wrong answer. So one of the biggest opportunities that we have, I think, is that a lot of solutions can help both and all generations. And you all have talked about it, that if we can develop the mentality and we can develop the social structures that encourage everybody to be in, that encourage that citizenship in Pinellas County is not only about paying your taxes, but really being involved in the community, that opens up a lot of doors. And Jackie, at the very beginning, you talked about isolation, and ARP's foundation has 4 major areas. One is hunger, big issue among elders. One is housing. One is income, and one is isolation. Because if you look at all of the others, they tend to start with isolation or they end with isolation. So the opportunities to engage across generations, I think, is a really good opportunity for us. And I think as we look at what our next generation of elders will look like, there is an assumption that baby boomers who have done nothing in their entire lives like their parents will somehow retire just like their parents. And I'm not sure where that comes from, but that's not my expectation. I think we're going to have a more active elder community. I think that they're never going to be okay with being called elders, by the way. But the experienced community will be starting new businesses, they will be entrepreneurs, they will be engaging as volunteers, and they will provide opportunities if we build a community that is welcoming to all generations. And I think that Pinellas County does a lot right, and I think that there are opportunities to further that.
Well, Jeff, as a proud member of AARP now in my 13th year,
thank you for your membership.
You do as proud, and I think looking at language is very important. Can you just share for a little bit about your re-engagement strategies?
Well, we have, yeah, I will. There's something in particular. So one of the things when you talk about multiple generations, people assume AARP is for those who are very old. We are going to be welcoming, well, really, our 4th generation next year when the first Gen Xer turns 50. Use that to depress your younger friends. And so we have to think multi-generationally as well. Different people have different needs, and that's not just a generational statement. However, we have a couple of different opportunities. Certainly, AARP has always had a strong volunteer component. We were founded by volunteers. We are governed by volunteers. We have a number of volunteer programs. We were founded out of the National Retired Teachers Association, and so there's a strong intergenerational piece there. We're looking for ways to engage other generations in a program called Mentor Up to help older folks navigate technology, for instance, or work through financial difficulties, or any number of other challenges. But the biggest thing that I'll point out that we're doing is we found that there is actually a new life stage that people don't really know about. They don't know what to call it. They know when they're in it. And it's that stage where they've done what they wanted to do in their career. They have, knock wood, emptied their nest, and they aren't ready to retire. And they don't know what to do next in their life. And so there's a program called Life Reimagined, where we've engaged some of the best thought leaders and life coaches and folks about recareering to try to help people navigate, what is it I always wanted to do when I grew up that I haven't yet done, and how do I go do it now? And that lifereimagined.org, that process is something that we're seeing has a lot of resonance in engaging people in their community, because all of that, whether you want to start a business or whether you want to volunteer, you want to re-engage with your community.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, Shannon, you are our anchor
Great.
You come from a financial corporation, and share with us your perception of both the challenges and opportunities in the world of finance.
Well, the interesting thing about money is it's often a bad word, right? So too little is not a good thing, and too much is sometimes not a good thing. So how do we help people manage their lives and manage through this financial life stages and the life cycles that they experience? And I think many of the people here have touched on the same issues that we think about at Raymond James and we think about as a business in Florida and in Pinellas County and across the nation, which is how do we engage more people in conversations about their money? We always hear the majority of marriages break up because people don't want to talk about money. But really it's at the crux of a lot of these problems. And we don't have a particularly good set of financial educational systems in our country, in our general educational programs. We don't start teaching young children early enough. You know, when I was growing up, we had an allowance, we had chores, we put the stickers on the chore chart, and then I got my $5 at the end of the week, and that's what I had if I wanted to go to the movies or the mall. Generations have changed a little bit. The Gen X parents, I think, have slightly different expectations of how they raise their kids, and may be somewhat more liberal in terms of what they're giving their kids. Technology has dramatically changed the way we parent. It's dramatically changed the expectations of people, particularly around financial matters and the information they should be able to receive, right at the palm of their hand. They want to know everything right now, immediately. And the media has had a big impact from a financial, particularly from an investment perspective, in that it's really skewed what people feel success is in terms of financial success. So if anybody in here watches CNBC, you hear Jim Cramer, or you watch the markets all day long. I talk to people from a financial planning perspective, and they say, I didn't beat the Dow. My portfolio is not beating the Dow. It's not doing what I hear on TV, so I must not be doing well. But it's because they don't understand how financial instruments work, and that's on us. It's really our responsibility to educate our clients and to educate the community about what is responsible stewardship of money and how to invest appropriately and how to save. And that begins from the very beginning when they're young children, just learning how do I manage saving something for that, I won't say iPad because that might take them 20 years to save for an iPad, but the comic book that they want to purchase or the Pokemon they want to go buy. So how do they earn their money and save it for that? That's the beginning step. Everybody in here probably went through that, but I know many kids today that the meaning of the word of allowance is not something they're familiar with. And then they get into their 20s, and we get into another, pardon my French, four-letter word, which is debt. And debt becomes a partner for life for a lot of people in their late teens and their 20s, particularly as they go to college. As you mentioned, education is the doorway to a very bright future. I was very fortunate in the education that I received and that my parents gave me. I came out with no debt. That is not the experience the majority of students, I think, have today. And they're coming out with more and more debt at higher rates, longer payment periods, and potentially into a more difficult employment environment. The 2008 recession had the greatest impact on college graduates. And so many of them took on all this debt to pay for college and then came out and, the best job they may have been able to get is a job at Starbucks. Hopefully that, as our economy is improving, that is improving. So they come out into their 20s worrying about debt. How am I going to cover my debt? They start to use credit cards, which is an even worse kind of debt. They're working to pay their daily bills, and they're forgetting about the future. The big difference between when our grandparents or my grandparents came out of their work lives and their work career, they had pensions. And one of the things I've always felt, we did a disservice to the baby boomers as a country to some extent, and following generations, because we never really explained what happened to them when we took away their pension and gave them a 401k, which was to say, you're now on your own. And what does that mean? And how much do you really need to save to expect to be covering your own expenses for potentially 20, 30, in some cases even longer? This 500,000 centenarians, people are still retiring at age 65. That's almost 40 years of life they need to cover. Now they'll work, they'll volunteer, they find other ways, but this is a major issue. So it's across multiple generations, these financial issues and financial literacy. The lack of financial literacy that we see in younger generations, I think, is particularly concerning. And then the people that are just starting to move towards retirement, I totally agree. They do not expect to retire the way their parents did. They don't want to stop working. They, 75 is the new 65. Maybe it's the new 55, right? I know lots of people that are in their 70s and extremely active and working very hard, but the opportunities are much fewer. People are still retiring younger than 65. They all sort of expect to retire at 65 or later, but for the most part, the age is a little bit younger due to health reasons or financial reasons, economic reasons. So all of these issues converge, and I think the baby boomer generation is one of those generations that's really stuck in the middle. I think we've all touched on those issues where they may have dependent children at home, they may have their parents still alive and taking care of them, and yet they've barely saved enough for their own retirement. So how do we help everyone plan for this future? It's possible, it's very bright, you can do it, but the sooner you start, we need to be telling our 19-year-olds, our 20-year-olds, our 25-year-olds, start saving now and start saving 10% or more and teaching them how they can do that. I see that as really one of the big opportunities that we have to make their future much brighter.
Thank you, Shannon, for that balanced presentation. I know one of the most shocking things I've ever seen was an envelope that came addressed to my son as a senior in high school, and the language on the envelope said free money. And it was a solicitation for him to sign on at his 18th birthday for a, quote, no-cost credit card. Now, I think that is financial malpractice. I took it on myself as a non-shy guy to go to the local branch of that one bank and ask them one very direct question: how dare you? How dare you send this to my son, giving him the idea that there is such a thing as free money? Now, I think we've gone through some federal legislation that has restricted some of that malpractice, but I think we also have an attitudinal adjustment to make about what that really means for a generation of young people. The other reality, not to add on to the cart too much, is the earning power has decreased compared to the cost of education and housing. So we have a generation of young people who are striving to basically make ends meet while other costs are skyrocketing. So we really have some challenges in the economic arena, and the more we learn, the more we have to express ourselves to our own both private and public sector organizations.
And one thing I just might add to that, speaking from the financial services industry, we very much believe in helping people understand how to achieve their goals and giving them very clear messages, both positive and negative, about how they get there. But it's very confusing. The average person does not understand how the equity market works, if they even understand what the equity market is, or the bond market, or interest rates. The language, even the language that we use, is often very confusing for people to understand. And it's on us, I think, as an industry, and I know many of us have been working in that direction, and I think we've made some very important strides on the mortgage side to really clarify what you're signing on for when you get a mortgage. We could do more of that on the other financial services sides as well.
Thank you. We are kind of halfway home in our conversation. Please join me in thanking our panel members for their excellent presentations. Now, we build this as a community conversation. while we are at the stage and you are in this distinguished audience and the lights go on, we rehearsed this for weeks. We wanted to give each person who would be brave enough a chance to share their perspective, whether by a question or a comment, and not a speech, a question or a comment based upon one or other of the key points made by our panel members. We are also going to, in a few minutes, distribute these yellow cards. We ask you to please fill out this card legibly so it can be read. It's going to ask for some additional contact information if you wish to stay in touch with us, but also there are going to be some spaces down on this bottom part and the back if you would like to write ideas or comments about the same questions we asked our panel. Not only the challenges, but opportunities for our multi-generations, because we're not done tonight when the clock chimes 9. We intend through the Institute, through Four Generations Institute, and our partners to keep this conversation going. And why do we want to do that? We feel compelled because it's a must. We have to connect the generations for us all to enjoy a better quality of life. And since I believe in incentives, for those of you who do fill out a yellow card legibly, that's Mr. Abramowitz talking, by the way, legibly, one of you will receive a gift by raffle of a fresh bottle of Harvest Ridgetop Gold honey from our own backyard in little old Tallahassee, Florida. Now, I know you didn't come here for a bottle of fresh honey, but it doesn't hurt any to incentivize your filling out this form, and we're going to do a raffle as our last order of business, so think about this. If anybody has tasted our backyard honey, you want some. Okay, Shantae, and who are our other microphone holders? I'm going to ask if there are any spontaneous comments before I kind of pepper the crowd with a few others. And I have a gentleman right here who is willing to open up and introduce himself. Right here. Please pass him the mic.
Gee, that's an awfully long walk. Thank you very much. One of the things...
Would you like to identify yourself?
Sure. My name is Ed Evan from Seminole, Florida. One of the themes that comes through from all of the people here is some sense of responsibility or lack thereof. For instance, we talk about the responsibility to vote for the continuation of the Juvenile Welfare Board and to know about such things. We talk about the responsibility for, say, not having children until you can afford them. We talk about the responsibility of learning enough to be able to have a decent lifestyle, whether it's at a lower level or a higher level. One of the things that I've seen in younger generations, partly because we seem to not give youngsters responsibility, that I believe that young people at about 14 are actually looking for responsibility, but we prevent that from happening for various reasons. And I personally believe that our community would be better if we had a way to give responsibility to people at younger ages than we do now, instead of postponing until, after high school learning about money. Or in college when you're in debt, how do you pay it off?
Ed, if I may underline that very good point and ask for any panel members who would wish to comment as well. You know, I know it's hard to say, especially when I'm speaking to youth audiences, about the old days, but how many of us come from families whose ancestors immigrated here as children, as teenagers, who made their way here and started a new life, sometimes under duress? So we are a multi-generational nation, we are a multi-generational state, and some of our ancestors achieved greatness through their teen years. We send teens off to war today. So the idea of growing a generation of responsible citizens early on in their young years is not only a good point, I think it's an essential point, and thank you for that, Ed. Comment? Yes, Renee.
I just wanted to share, I think Ms. Reed made a very good point about learning about money, but also respecting money. And that is something that I think we could probably do a better job at teaching. We have Enterprise Village and things like that where students can go, and they most certainly have an opportunity. There are several banks that have partnered with us, and they learn how to write a check, how to fill out deposit slips, or how to calculate their savings certificate and things of that nature. But I also even recall during my generation, it was whatever it is that you wanted, you worked towards that. It wasn't just given to you, even though my parents could afford to give it to us. And the analogy behind that was you respect things more when you work for them versus if someone just gives it to you. And so when that lifeline is taken away, it's shock. It is shock. And I do think that we have kind of an oxymoron going on with education, or even our future generations. We tell you that an education is the doorway to a better opportunity, but we continue, and when I say we, I don't mean those of us up here or you, we continue to put roadblocks in the road so that they can't afford it, or they have $60,000 and $90,000 loans, many of the articles we've read, when they graduate, and then they can't find a job in the field that they've gone to school in, or if they find a job, it's not paying the dollar value in order to be able to live and pay back the loans. So I think it's kind of an oxymoron of what we do in our society when we encourage individuals to move forward, and we desire that they do so, but then there are so many roadblocks that prohibit them from moving forward.
So we need a reality check on that
Definitely.
responsibility. Jeff?
And I know that talking about kids is not necessarily what you would expect my beat to be, but a couple of points. I think you're right. I think you're very much right that youth today look for the opportunities for responsibility. And a couple of points, shortly after I finished schooling, I noticed the trend of service learning as something that became an expectation first at the collegiate level and then at the high school level. And I think that has worked to a large degree. My wife teaches at Petersburg College, another, not St. Pete College, but another fine school in the area nonetheless. And and she encounters so many people who are students driven to change the world that she honestly believes will do it. The other thing, to go even younger, I can't tell you how many kids, like tweens, 8, 9, 10, 11, have in their mind not to open their own lemonade stand, but their own nonprofit. That there are, at least around here, and this is, again, I travel in no stats in this part of the age range, but it seems to me that there is something, whether it was sparked by September 11th, and this is truly a post-9/11 generational thing, or something else, but you see not only an entrepreneurialism, but one that is driven by social change and social outcomes that I think is very promising.
There's a little boy from Tampa named Zach who started with his little red wagon about 9 years ago. I met him when he was 11. He had heard about homeless children in his own area, Valrico, Florida, and has since found a Red Wagon Foundation, has walked the country with his red wagon, collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars and pledges to help homeless children. So it's not just one Zach. There's probably hundreds of thousands who are ready to take action within the purview of what Ed is speaking about. Shannon, yes?
I think just one additional comment I would make is I agree with your comment, although I am constantly, that story that you told, constantly surprised by what young people are doing today. Really, really unbelievable things that I don't remember hearing about in my generation of 14, 15, 16-year-old children doing, walking the country. But the other point I might make about particularly younger generations is I believe they have far more distractions than we had growing up. You know, I had TV, but I could barely watch it. My kids have iPads, they have phones, they have, they read, they play sports. I think parents often maybe not all parents, but a lot of parents are putting a very different level of pressure on young children. I'll use my own personal example. You know, my son plays soccer. He's 8 years old. He's not very good, you know. We dream, but we dream. But there are parents of 8-year-old children who have their children in dedicated soccer classes every single day because their child is going to play at Manchester United, or they're going to play at the University of Florida football. At 8 years old, they're getting dedicated quarterback coaching, because if they don't do it at 8 years old, they won't be good enough to go to the University of Florida, or FSU, or not my school, and we did not have a good football team, but basketball maybe. But I think the pressures are very different on young children today. Your point is very well taken. I do believe we need to give them more responsibility, but we also need to take some of that pressure off. We as parents, I believe, need to take some of that pressure off, which our parents did not put on us. When I went to school, play every sport, do every activity, do the theater, do the chorus, do well in school, you know, broaden your horizons. Today, I feel like it's much more, you need to really focus and be outstanding at one thing, so you get noticed for that, and we don't value that broad experience that maybe the rest of us had a chance to have as children.
Thank you. Let's turn to our audience. I see a hand raised right here. David, and then we'll go to this side of the room.
My name is Marilyn Brand, and I'm past this generation. But when I worked in the school districts, the teacher summoned me because she had a problem. The girls were putting beer in the milk bottles of their children. And so I came to teach about what babies need in their milk bottles. And it's milk and not beer. And she said to me, "Lady, my mother put beer in my milk bottle and I'm fine. And now I'm putting beer in my baby's milk bottle."
Is this about a kind of sleep inducement? What is the deal here?
What is the deal?
Oh, yeah, sleep inducement? What is the rationale? I can't believe this, Marilyn.
What I'm saying is that we have to teach children and maybe teachers things that are right and not wrong. And that's really where the big problem comes in. When I taught about drug education and I told the children that they can be arrested for having drugs and selling them, they said, "No problem. My brother did it and he never got arrested, so I'm doing it now." These are the problems that we have with regard to the children and how they are being raised. And the gentleman over there said something about giving children custody to their parents or their grandparents that were not able to raise their children properly. So the problem we have here is going down to the basics. And the basics is, what is good nutrition? What are good problems that we can overcome with the drug problem that people are getting away with it?
Marilyn, would you mind sharing your age with us?
My age?
Yes.
I'm 85.
Thank you very much for coming out tonight. And thank you, Terry, for bringing Marilyn to us. Marcy, I have a question rooted in Marilyn's point. Because the Juvenile Welfare Board has such a spectrum of community connections and initiatives, how do you all think about this generational issue as we go forward of not duplicating mistakes made, but promoting positive path for another generation? How does that really happen programmatically?
I think that probably one of the better ways is to model it. And so we have to work in every way we can with, like we do now a VITA program that helps people get back their income tax. But it wasn't just, it was one thing to get back some of the money that you earned, but the second thing we had to do was to teach something about savings, because the immediate thing to do as soon as they got a check back was to go buy the 56-inch TV And so that wasn't helping a lot. So there's a lot of educating and, but modeling for parents so they can model for their children. And I think that's part of the issue is the parents didn't get some of the things that they needed to have. And so, you know, we talk about children pay attention to their parents more than the parents know. You know, a parent probably thinking that their child's not, one, listening to them or paying any attention to them, and I can guarantee you they are. Because the thing that popped into my mind when you first said it was about coaching and about helping children see what something is and not just be told what it is. But they get way more out of what they see around them as opposed to what somebody said, because they're not going to necessarily read the book about it, but they certainly will pay attention to someone that they think highly of. That's how we started this evening. You know, who helped you? Who did you think about? Well, that's exactly what children are doing right now. They're looking around for who is going to influence them, who's going to help them make a difference as they grow up. And so there's an awful lot more of let's demonstrate what the right thing to do and help others to demonstrate it. One quick thing we used to do, I worked in a program for Devereaux that we taught people how to do certain things. We had classes on, but one of them had to do with a grandparent class. We actually had all grandparents in. And we were talking about how when you see a young teenager with a baby and carrying that baby almost like a football, we were talking to the group and saying, well, how would you do that without offending or getting the teenager angry? And one grandmother just said, I just say, I'm a grandmother. And let me show you something. And with this kindest voice, she reached over, takes the baby, talks about how to hold the baby, and then said, and then I just hand the baby back. And she said, you'd be surprised how many young people will just go ahead and do it. They don't need a lecture. They don't need anything else. They just need to know how. And I think that's part of it, is that we need to quit talking about what and talk about how.
You know, I was thinking also about the whole modeling piece and how we have to find role models for children and for their parents. And I think one of the things we have to really pay attention to is how to get the messages across, because I can talk to someone like me and easily explain to them the right or wrong or the this way or the that way. But if it is someone who comes from a different background, a different culture, what makes sense in my little head isn't going to make sense to them. We worked on a program years ago now, and not in this county, trying to improve the rate of prenatal access for women who are pregnant. And everyone knows that, you know, the earlier you go to the doctor when you're pregnant, the better your birth outcomes are going to be, and all of that. And we were funding these programs that weren't having any success in a Guatemalan community until we discovered, that the men are the gatekeepers to the doctors in that community. And so we recreated a program and had men go talk to the men and talk to them in their language about, and from their perspective about the value for their families. And it dramatically changed the rate of access for prenatal care. So that story has stayed with me because I think it's applicable in so many situations. You know, how we address and how we go in and show and demonstrate and who carries that message is really, really important.
I'm going to put a friend on the spot because that's what friends do on occasion. There is a service program now in many, many counties that was actually founded in Florida in the early 80s in Jacksonville called Pace Center for Girls. And what I have found, and I think there might be some universal agreement for those of you who know Pace Center, that this is a Florida homegrown model that is now proliferated not only with positive outcomes in Florida, but now will be going outside of Florida with their planning. I'm going to put my friend Samantha on task here. Samantha, up you go. This is one of our bright millennials who happens to be the Government Affairs Director for Pace Center for Girls of Florida. And Samantha, one of the outcomes of saying yes to coming tonight is to have you share for a moment or two, a few moments, about the PACE model and why that fits in with our conversation about influence about the generations. Thank you.
No, definitely. Oh, loud. So I think as Jack and I were actually kind of talking, and really what brought us here, what brought me from Tallahassee all the way down to your community here, was really with our girls who are middle school and high school age, so 11 to 17 years, not only are they impacted by the immediate circle and the network that we provide them as service providers, counselors, teachers, educators, support systems, but our girls, just as many of y'all have actually touched on and really, I think, have pointed to breaking the cycles. Our girls are the product of cycles. So for us, being able to talk to them about, all right, mom, aunt, your grandmother, whoever has influenced you and taught you these specific traits and behaviors, let's talk about what is the appropriate behaviors. How can you as an individual break the cycle yourself? How can you go back to your community, your friends, your family, your immediate family members, and educate them? So for us, kind of really hitting on the 4 generations, it's the generations that have not only impacted our girls and their families, because again, that is our network. It's working with those 2 or more generations, because as we all know, with certain populations, you're gonna have multi-generations within the same household or apartment complex, depending on the community. But really kind of touching on the education component of it, and don't always expect the information to come from the top down, but you can take it, you know, as a strong young female and bring it back up through.
Thank you. And pacecenter.org, correct?
Yes.
Pacecenter.org.
Yes.
Why I am paying special emphasis on PACE is because the conversation is about not only education, not only behavioral lifestyle, not only prevention of juvenile justice problems, but really another generation, perhaps of moms, who will now learn how to pass the positive lessons of PACE on to their children if they actually mother at some point in the future. Do I have another hand? Yes, right here up front. And then I'll go back there. Right here, David, in the bright turquoise. If you are able, would you rise?
My name is Judy Kramer. I'm 73 years old. I live in Sun City Center. The point I wanted to make is that in my family and in the friends of my children, we have 3 children, I see a challenge that my generation didn't face, and that is that women have more opportunity, professional opportunities, and they are working more, and they are not in the home the way my parents were, the way my mother was when I was growing up. And the challenge for me was that when all 3 of my children were in college at the same time, my parents were in their 80s and needed my help. I had to go back to work so that we could pay for 3 tuitions at the same time. And the challenge was, how do I help my children, help my parents, and hold together my family? And I see that as a change when I look at my children. All of the 3 women work. They work full-time. And it's very difficult for them, and I see that as a change, and I would appreciate any thoughts you had on that issue.
Yes, please, Renee, and then we'll go to Jeff.
It's real interesting that you said that 2 of my colleagues are here, School Board Member Linda Lerner and School Board Member Terry Krasner, and I know often we are talking about parents who may have a child that is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And the mom is a single mom, working sometimes 2 jobs, maybe more than 1 child, and has one that maybe needs a little bit more attention than the others. But then the choice is, I don't go to work, I can't make just the simple provisions, or I go to work, and then what am I going to do with the child that needs some of that additional help? And some of the things that we've done with some after-school wraparound services programs, thanks to the funding of JWB, most certainly the Boys and Girls Club, the Royal Theaters, the PALs, places like that, that can be a safe environment for a child to be in while that parent is working, feeling a little comfortable about that. But it is still very stressful. because when you come home, you still have those motherly responsibilities, and then who's taking care of you? Who's taking care of you as the mom? We're the ones that feel like we have to fix everything. And sometimes we have to understand that we can't fix everything because we are broken. And we've got to figure out how can we help ourselves so that we have the energy to help others. So I think your comment is just so on point. And real quick, I want to just touch on Marilyn.
Marilyn.
Because as you were talking about the beer in the bottle, I kind of giggled a little bit because a thought process at one point was if a child had worms, beer would kill the worms. And so adults, I'm just telling you, my grandmama, you know, and so they would give the child a little beer because beer killed the worms. Now you hear about parents maybe having a child who won't go to sleep, so they give the child adult cold medicine, which can in turn harm the liver of a child. I work full-time for Gulf Coast Jewish Family Community Services from that perspective, so this is that mental health, substance abuse hat. They're giving that to the child to put them to sleep, or so that they can sleep through the night. Or they would take a little alcohol and rub on the child's gum if they're teething. Well, they make teething medications now, so but back then that was what they did because there weren't other alternatives. And so yes, when you have grandparents that say, I raised all my children that way and they turned out absolutely fine. Well, maybe they didn't turn out absolutely fine. They have some issues and concerns because of some things being introduced to them early on that perhaps would not have been introduced to them otherwise.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you. Jeff, you had a comment?
I did, and although I think you raise a great point, that goes back to what Eileen said earlier, that you're not going to be able to change a behavior if you don't understand where it comes from. So the concern that is to come, you did a great job of talking about the importance of child care, but elder care is something that we haven't grappled with yet as a country, because we kind of know what child care looks like. They go to school, and then what do we do with them between school and when you come home from work? Every day, Monday through Friday, generally. Elder care is different. Elder care is episodic, and it's exhausting, and it's acute, and it's a challenge that is predominantly borne by women, not solely but predominantly. And right now, the level of care that's being given by family members to loved ones to keep them in their home, if we paid them what you would pay a home health aide or a suitable professional, be about $350 billion a year industry, which is about what Walmart brings in a year. We don't know how to keep the caregiver healthy and sane so that they can continue to do that. And we don't know how to augment that with what they don't know how to do or can't do. And until we figure that out, which we need to do fairly quickly, we are going to be facing a lot of not only stressed out moms and daughters, but a lot of families that break down.
You know, we in Florida are kind of graced in the last 7, 8 years that we haven't had one of these storms. You remember when we used to have hurricanes? And the weather forecaster would do this kind of round motion and say, we're not sure exactly which coast it's going to hit, but it's coming and it could be a level 4. Well, friends, I take analogy pills every day. We've got a 4th-generation storm coming our way, and evacuation is not an option. We have got to figure out the relationships that need to be fortified because we can't escape these realities, but then again, we can't go about believing that it's not coming. It's a natural force, and we've got to do something creative and have our political leaders in our debates, in election years, talk about this reality that our families are facing. And we've got to put it on our friends in the media who are supposed to ask the good questions. Instead of asking, where were you 25 years ago with this photograph, ask, what is your plan for our 4 generations? And not take, oh, well, someday we'll come up with a plan. I think that plan is 25 years overdue. I don't know if you agree with me, but I will tell you there's a whole lot of nonsense being said about sloganing and not a lot about solutions. And I just got on a soapbox because I got in the mood. And I will tell you something else, that we've got a mail problem. And I don't mean M-A-I-L with delivery of mail. I mean M-A-L-E. We have got a whole, I'm going to tell on our gender here, guys. We got a whole lot of guys who can name 200 football players and don't know the name of one of their kids' teachers. We've got a lot of guys who are not engaged in their family life. They're out there doing something else, recreation, whatever, and they are not connecting with their children. Of 750 child development associates, that is our, quote, degree with the 60-hour training for early childhood. Of 750, one is a male in the state of Florida. Now, we love the fact that women are dedicated to children, but where are the guys in these young children's lives? And the answer is, in many cases, not in the home, not in the community, and not in the classroom. So we've got to work this. That's my opinion. You may disagree. We can have that debate as we go forward, but we've got some work to do about uniting the generations. And it's not going to be the work of the folks who couldn't make it tonight. It's going to be the work of us who are here tonight, because guess what? You are concerned enough to take Bill Law's invitation and David Clement's invitation. So we've got some work to do. It's not only dollars, it's time. It's investment of time. As Judge Gross said, guardian ad litem is a prime example. PTA is a prime example. Getting people to do reading pals for young children, visiting hospice. We've got a generation of young people who can contribute. Al, was it? Al? Ed. I got the two letters right. Ed, so that we can have a new generation of involvement. We have time for a couple more comments before we do the honey drawing. We're going to get this woman on the aisle. Would you rise if you're able and introduce yourself?
Good evening.
The microphone up, please. We have to hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now? My name is Glendine Davis, and I'm 66 years old. I guess what I wanted to say, it's more like a challenge as well as opportunities. As you may be aware, our foster care system is growing. And, you know, foster parents are doing the best they can. However, foster care system is not a family. It's not where our children should be. So that perpetuates a problem in itself. The reason I bring that up is that I'm a grandparent and I took custody of my grandchildren. As a result of taking custody of them, I've only held 3 jobs, and the last one I lost because of not having the services that I needed in order to keep my grandchildren. Many of my friends even told me, put them in foster care. But those are my grandchildren. So I kept them. And in view of that, I did lose my last job. I wish there was some way I could have a one-on-one with each of you up there to let you know that there are many challenges. When I go to the pediatrician office, when I go to directions, because my grandchildren have been impacted emotionally because of what has happened to them, you see so many grandparents sitting there. We all look tired because we're working. You know, we're just doing a lot. We're wearing a lot of hats. But there are not enough services out there for the grandparents that are trying to do it. For Renee, Miss Flower, for example, one of my grandchildren was attending Calvin Huntsinger every day. Now, when you go to Calvin Huntsinger, you know that that child has behavior problems, because they couldn't make it in the, the traditional classroom. And he is being suspended for behaviors that would be in tune or in line with the child with his problems. And I'm getting calls. He would leave the house 6:45 in the morning, a 4th grader, 5th grader. And I'm getting a call at 7:15, 7:30 to come get him because they can't handle his behaviors. So it makes me wonder, who do we have teaching them? And all they're doing is warehousing him. They want to schedule the conferences early in the mornings. Okay, that's just for you.
Glendine, you are what I call an authentic voice. Professionals can only say so much. They're credentialed, and we love our professionals. But, Glendine, I have a question for you.
Yes.
What is the name of your state senator?
Well, I have several. And the one
No. Well, okay, go ahead.
The one who has been most helpful to me has been Bill Arrakis.
Okay, he is a U.S. congressman.
I know.
He does not vote in
I know.
Tallahassee.
I know. I know.
Okay, this is not confrontive. We need authentic voices like you who have not invented the 25th hour of the day.
I know
or
who
the
they
8th day
are,
of the
but
week.
they are of no help to me.
Well, we need to work on that. And again,
Yes.
I don't want to get to debate with
Oh,
you.
no, that's okay.
I think we
but-
need to be able to bring the voices of the concerned and committed grandparents in our community up in front of leaders who are making the decisions to perhaps not invest as wisely as we could in our children.
Right.
So we'll talk more about that.
And the reason I'm presenting some of this is because I think each and every one of them are sitting in positions
Yes.
that might be able to at least advocate for some of those services that the grandparents need. And perhaps we might be able to keep a lot of these
Yes.
children out of the foster care system, because these are the children that are of our tomorrow.
Well said,
Hopefully
Glendine.
they'll be our leaders.
We pledge to be in touch with you, Glendine.
Okay.
You know that little yellow card?
I wrote
Oh, good.
quite a bit on it.
Nice and legible. Thank you, Glendine.
Jay,
Yes,
real
please.
quick, I will give you my card before I leave, hopefully if you haven't left already. My full-time job, Gulf Coast Jewish Family Community Services, we have the Eckert contract for child care services and things of that nature. I'll also give you that card, and maybe we can have a conversation about some services. Maybe you've already touched base, maybe not, but I'd love to share those with you.
Okay, we're going right here. Right here. Shante?
I'm right here.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Connie Going. I am a social worker from the child welfare system, but I am also an adoptive parent. And Glendine was my supervisor 25 years ago. And she also is an adoptive parent. What I hear us saying is generational. And I think about this because I live it. I believe that sometimes we separate into our areas. And we have these great soccer moms who keep, pushing their kids sometimes. And then I was at a home today of a boy picking up my son from his football practice at Gibbs. And they didn't live in a very big home. And he was vested. And he had a value. And I think of all the kids in foster care that don't have that. My son grew up in foster care. He wanted to play football his entire life. He is 14. He played last year for the first time. He was in foster care from age 3 to the time I adopted him last year. He had a failed adoption. But what I want to share with you is that all of you who sit here and we live in different communities, is do we step out of our communities? If we live in Seminole, do we go down to South St. Pete? I'm renting a house in Rozier Park right now. It's close to my children's school. I love St. Pete. I have lived in a lot of the different areas. But when you're a guardian ad litem, you go into the different communities. How do we separate? How do we, and even my parents, they didn't understand adoption. They didn't understand foster care, and I've done it 25 years. And they said, you get benefits when you adopt? I said, yes, Mom, I have some support, but it's not enough. These children are our future. They are growing up in foster care. And we are all busy with our children and our lives. And I just ask everyone to look at who you are and what can you do to touch a piece of it. Could you become a guardian ad litem? Could you become a foster parent? Could you look at adopting a child? Many of you saw the story of Davion. He was looking for a family. We have 125 of those children in Pinellas and Pasco counties. So I ask you to look into your hearts and see what piece can you do. Can you volunteer in your school system? Think about it. Could you, if you live in Seminole, it'd be good to volunteer in Seminole, but could you volunteer in St. Pete? Could you volunteer in Tarpon?
Let me put a number on that point because I think it's so well taken. This is a county of 1 million. 1% of this county is 10,000. 2 hours a week, 100 hours a year for 10,000 people is 1 million hours of community investment. Now, I'm not saying there's not anything going on. There's a lot going on. But if we added and sweetened the pot with another 1 million hours, which is 1% of your population at 2 hours a week, 2 weeks off, that's 100. Imagine how many children would get positive role modeling, how many young children would learn to read, how many elders would be visited, how many children with special needs would be helped. And that's 1 million hours of 1% of your population at 2 hours a week. And as we know from our history with Guardian Ad Litem and other time philanthropy programs, I don't use the term volunteerism, I call it time philanthropy. Once you get started, you are fulfilled because the giver is the getter. The relationship builds. So you think by consensus that we can invest another 1 million hours next year through a time bank of talent and interest in our community? And guess what? Your political leaders at every level, your elected officials, and bless you, Renee, for offering yourself for public service, would get the message that that kind of investment deserves match dollars to manage it. So I say let's make a pledge of getting 1% of our community to do 2 hours a week at 1 million hours and go from there. Anybody agree with me? All right, we have time for one more comment before we do our honey raffle. I had a hand right over here. Oh, yep. Okay, you're up. And I apologize for anyone else who had a comment, but we will not run off. We can say hello to our panel members once we adjourn. Please.
Kind of nice. I feel like one of the young folks in the group. I'm 35. Hi. I'm
Hi.
Angela. I work for Metro Wellness and Community Centers, and we see the
You're
kids.
going a little faster.
Sorry.
So
Metro Wellness and Community Centers.
Thanks.
I work with young people and doing education opportunities. I was at PACE this morning. Love PACE. And I see the kids in juvenile justice, and I see the kids in the housing projects, and I see the kids that are coming, out of or into the child welfare system. And some of them I see, they don't have this sense of no responsibility. They have this sense of being overburdened with, I had a kid who just out of prison, who his goal was to be successful. And I said, what does success look like to you? And he said, I want to be able to buy my mom a house and a car. And I said, okay, but if you're never able to buy your mom a house and a car, does that mean that you failed at life? And he said, yes. So the financial literacy piece, the taking care of the older generations, even if they're not that much older, the education system, the child welfare system, it's so connected. And I think that's maybe the underscoring point of all of this is that we can't just address one. We have to address all of them. We have to address the systems. And when you talked about men, I felt like I was in church. I was like, amen, hallelujah. Because you see the girls I find at PACE, the boys I find at juvenile justice. And there's a real divide in the way that boys and girls are taught and raised and the examples they have to follow. And I think if men did get involved and were more positive role models for the boys, that maybe they wouldn't be so much in juvenile justice.
Thank
and maybe
you.
we'd have more opportunities.
Thank you. We have 2 more matters of business. We're going to pass our yellow cards to the center and have one of our volunteers bring them up. And we're going to give 1 minute last words to our panel members. And we're going to start with you, Shannon.
I didn't know we had a last word. Okay. Well, first I want to thank everybody for their comments. And I think this has been a particularly interesting evening for me. I've learned a lot. I think I've learned a lot from the other panel members. Learned a lot from your experiences. I think a lot about the business community and how we can do more, and obviously I'm focused in financial services, but how we can help really connect. And one of our big focuses at Raymond James is about bringing younger generations not only into our business, but also into financial literacy programs and teaching them what it means to work and what it means to work in an office in a professional setting as early as possible. So I think some of these internship programs, businesses could certainly do more around that to give them, to your point, a 14-year-old an experience of what it's like, both boys and girls, to be in a professional setting and what the expectation is and what everybody does in those kinds of scenarios. So I think if I were to take one thing back to my office and my business, that might be one thing I think we could do more of and we could do a better job
Thank
at.
you. And we're going to follow up with you on that point. Jeff?
This has been a wonderful night, and the ideas that I've gotten just from hearing everybody has been very enriching, and I didn't think of what my my real last word would be, because I was trying to think of, I need to get to Bill Law because I have an idea for Connie that we can work on. But so I guess the real last word is, a lot of people don't think about ARP as being interested in multi-generational, and I think the fact that our founder from the very beginning said that we're about, our motto is to serve and not be served. And I think that that is an attitude that we need to reignite within all our generations if we're going to be successful.
Ray.
I too want to echo what they've said. I've learned much from your comments and questions. From my perspective, where I sit, the breakdown of the family, not multi-generational, but the family, and the proliferation of single-parent families. I specifically comment on a daily basis, when it happens on a daily basis, when I have a child who appears in front of me with two parents. It happens so infrequently. So is it a shock that the child is there? We go over here to the parents who are working, who aren't there, and that's probably in a two-parent home. But we've got to strengthen the family bind. We've got to have better role models. We absolutely have to have both mothers and fathers working together and trying to help raise these next generations.
Thank you, Ray. Renee.
And it is a pleasure being here on this evening and getting to see so many of my old friends throughout. For the young lady that stood up last, help is on the way. I served as the chair of the board for AMI Kids Pinellas. We just got a $500,000 appropriation for a gender-specific male school like PACE for girls. And I'm excited about that. So help is on the way there. And I just want to give a takeaway that we always say that our children are our future and it takes a village, and we've got to really invest. And investing is not always money, as you said. Investing is time. When you sit with a child who hasn't had anyone to spend 30 minutes of hearing what it is that they have to say. Just like tonight, you have heard what it is that we've had to say. And I think we need to do a little bit more of that, and that'll help us in the long run. But Jack, I thank you for allowing us to be a part of this conversation, and I look forward to more conversations in our community that talk about how we can be each other's brother's keeper.
Thank you, Renee. Eileen, last words?
I love a meeting where everybody actually states their age. So I am 52. And that everyone states it with pride, and everyone around them hears it with respect. And so for me, that's kind of the message that I came across with Ray starting by talking about wearing the tie to honor somebody who was important. How do we honor and respect everyone in every generation? How do we recognize what are the right things for a 14-year-old to be expected to do and not to do? How do we recognize that the work of children is play? And make sure that they have that for them at early ages instead of being driven to soccer games every day. So I think that's sort of my takeaway as I listen. It's really about, the value of every person, every individual person, and every age.
Thank you. Marcy.
Okay, I'm 68. And I was sitting here thinking I could have retired, but I didn't, because I am part of that group that wants to keep going, that I have a lot of things I have experience, I have knowledge, and I want to share that. And the takeaway, or the thing that I think about for you all, one, I do want to appreciate the fact that you would come here this evening and spend a couple of hours after you've been at work or after you've done a full day of something else, because this is important. And I think that really is appreciated by all of us. But the one thing I would say is, if we really all could understand how important it is to pay attention, I don't care if it's to a child, to an elderly person, it doesn't matter. Pay attention. Because people talk, and we're not listening. And one of the things that we know, we're working on an out-of-school time proposal type, or RFP for a proposal, and the primary thing about out-of-school time that they put on the top of the list after we went through all the national literature was that the relationship between a child and a person who was there at the program, that made the biggest difference, that somebody paid attention to them, that they could talk to somebody. Doesn't have to be a relation, they don't have to be a relative, they don't have to even know them. But if somebody pays attention, that makes a difference, and I think that goes for all ages. I don't think it has to do with children.
Well, if all goes well, next Thursday, the 26th of June, I'll be 63. And my father was 60 when I was born, so my wife is going, no, 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 no. Some history doesn't repeat itself. Well, I have 2 more orders of business. I want to lead a special thank you round of applause by our audience for our panel members. I want to lead another special round of applause by our panel members for our audience. Woo! We have a honey drawing. Boy, that was pretty boisterous. Well rehearsed. We have a honey drawing, but first I'd like to lead you in the Advocate's Credo. So would you repeat after me? Thou art my child, my parent, and my elder. I love thee best, but could not love thee half as much. Loved I not all the rest. It kind of rhymes, right? It's a measure of the love we have for our own, however you define that, by that which we're willing to do for others. It makes the love of ours whole. You've heard from 6 wonderful leadership voices, but we are all leadership voices in building our intergenerational community. Again, thanks for the Tampa Bay Times. Woo, almost said it. For the Tampa Bay Times. Thanks for David. Thanks for Dr. Law and for all of our staff members. And now, for the good of the order, it's time for a honey drawing.
Jack, the panel wants to be in the drawing.
Ask for a special round of applause for our moderator, Jack Levine. Thank you for bringing us together, making us more aware of this challenge and the opportunities. I believe we have identified a good bit of common ground tonight, and I hope that we can build on it. And I want to thank each of you in the audience for showing up, taking time out of your busy schedules to be part of this project. We hope that we can count on you as we build on this first effort to create something more than a one-show event. And as you leave, I hope you'll consider coming to some of our future programs. On June 28th at 8:30 in the morning, we're going to be planting sea oats at Sunset Beach, Treasure Island, to honor Senator Dennis Jones, who was named our Distinguished Citizen of the Year earlier this year. We're planning a living tribute to him with sea oats. On August 6th, we will be introducing you to the candidates for the judicial bench from the Sixth Circuit. We're having a forum for those candidates, 11 of them, at the Clearwater campus on August 6th at 6 in the evening. And finally, on August 28th, we'll have the second part of a series we're doing on the transit tax referendum that we're voting on in November in Pinellas. That will be at the Enoch Davis Center in Midtown, and I hope you'll come out for that. And now, thank you for coming, and safe journey home.